This is the therapy session observation presentation assignment by Rhonda Degree. And I started actually with the therapy session titled Closing and Summary. And I did so because in every session, the counselor was observed doing the same thing throughout every session. He gave feedback. He offered a different perspective. As the sessions were coming to an end, he offered more feedback. In some cases, he gave homework. He recapped, and he always discussed what to expect in the next session. He took notes in every session, and he gave a different perspective as far as how to think about a certain topic or situation differently. And he done that. He did do that in every session. So in the closing and summary therapy session, the session summarized the previous sessions, the client's goals, more time to do things, having a little sister, and spending time with the parents were further discussed. Excuse me. The counselor then collaborates with the client on the summary of the sessions throughout the session. Feedback is offered, given a different perspective. As the session ends, more feedback is given, and homework is also suggested. Finally, the next session and what to expect are discussed. What was observed? The counselor was relaxed as he recapped previous sessions, reviewing the notes he had taken throughout the sessions. He spoke slowly. He made good eye contact. The client's personal space was respected. The client sat forward and was engaged in the conversation, appearing appreciative of the input she received. Application of theory. The scheme theory would be applicable. The theory creates a foundation that assists in organizing and interpreting information. Previous knowledge gives understanding to new experiences. And from that slide, I went to the therapy session titled Opening Wishes and Goals. In the summary of this particular session, the session began with the counselor reviewing the confidentiality statement. Then the counselor wanted to explore the topics that were of interest to the client. Answers were obtained using the appropriate age with wish and goals questioning. What was observed? The counselor was relaxed, sitting back in his chair. The client sat on the edge of the chair, wringing her hands. The counselor repeated the client's words and sometimes offered different solutions or different words to complete her sentence. Both counselor and client maintained eye contact. The counselor respected the client's personal space. The counselee was clean, appropriately dressed, did not appear disheveled. Application of the theory. Because this is a young child, the attachment theory could be one approach because it considers relationships between the child and the caregiver. This theory deals with the need for safety and security and explores how relationships have social and emotional attachments. That session was titled, What's Good About You? Session in summary. The session allowed the counselee to express herself by answering the following. The question posed, what's good about you? She was asked this question 10 times. The answer taught the counselee enough to add other good character traits about the counselee, and for the counselee to also reflect on those positive traits. What was observed? The counselor is relaxed and made good eye contact. The counselor respects the client's space. I'm sorry. And also, the counselor could list her character traits by how. Back. And the next therapy session that I observed was the 3-step emotional change trick. Summary of the session. The counselor explains the 3 steps of emotional change. 1, experience of emotions. Allow yourself to feel the emotion. 2, do something different or think a different thought. Think the opposite of what you were previously thinking. And do an activity that improves your mood. 3, spread your good mood to others and allow others, it's actually, I guess 3.2, is allow others to experience your good mood. And the next session, and the next observed therapy session was TJ's anger management session. Summary of the session: the client is receiving counseling for anger management. The counselor opens the session by asking what the client wishes to accomplish after the client shares his physical hurts. The counselor shifts his questioning to emotional injury. The counselor continues with projective and presuppositional questions, including what-if scenarios. What was observed? The counselor appeared apprehensive initially during his initial interaction with the client. The client seemed guarded, leaning back in his chair with his head resting against the back. As the session continued, the client began to open up more. Initially, he responded with only yes or no answers and required prompting through the counselor's open-ended questions. The counselor did a great job of focusing on the client's potential for empathy and desire to treat people well. Application of theory. Given the nature of the client's presenting issues, the humanistic psychology theory could be applied. The humanistic theory by Roger and Maslow is based on the potential of the individual in self-actualization. The counselor in this case continuously brings the client to a point of recognizing those traits in himself that are good. He uses the client's experiences and the goodness humans inherently possess to give the client a humanistic perspective. And the next therapy session was the motivational interviewing session. The summary of the session. The session focused on the client's alcohol use. The counselor began by seeking permission to ask open-ended questions. He was relaxed, leaning back in his chair, while the client also appeared at ease and maintained good eye contact. What was observed? The counselor asked the client why he needed to use alcohol. The client explained that it makes him more social, allows him to have fun. Open-ended questions were asked about what is less good about drinking. And we go to the application of theory. Albert Bandura's social learning theory can be applied to this scenario. Recovery programs are set up to allow learned behavior to influence others' behavior. This involves imitating modeling and observational learning. This happens in such groups as AA and NA. And then on to the biblical and worldview. The next session that I observed was the CBT session on social anxiety. Summary of the session. The counselor starts by setting an agenda, making a problem list, and discussing behaviors related to the problems. One of the client's complaints is the fear of public speaking and the anxiety it causes. The counselor uses the session to discuss how less helpful thoughts can replace beneficial thoughts. He explained that cognitive response focuses on not what happens, but what you think will happen. The client was given suggestions to prepare as much as possible for upcoming events and to think how she can use self-talk to be successful at that particular event. What was observed? The counselor was relaxed. He respected the client's personal space, made good eye contact. The client appeared somewhat nervous. She continually rocked her leg back and forth. She maintained good eye contact and explained her feelings well. The counselor asked open-ended questions and paraphrased what he thought she was saying. He gave suggestions in a way that did not negate her approach to the problem, but offered another option as a solution. The session ended with a recap of what was to expect in the next session. And application of theory. Cognitive behavioral theory connects cognitive and behavioral approaches theory. Therapy focuses on thoughts and feelings. The things we think and believe influence the way we behave. Positive ones replace negative thoughts. Patterns, positive thoughts affect behavior. Stressors are managed by effectively handling emotions and thoughts. The client's quality of life improves through their active participation. And then on to the next session, which this therapy session was the mental status examination session. Summary of session. The session examines how the brain works through a series of questions. The questions start easy and become progressively harder. Intermittent memory is assessed by having the client recall objects, names later in the session. Questions are then asked to determine affect and mood. The session flow continues with questions to assess thoughts that get stuck, psychotic thoughts, delusions, hallucinations, and abstract thinking. Other assessment questions include social judgment, impulsivity, and questions to assess empathy and social interest. What was observed? The session began with the counselor explaining what could be expected throughout the session. The counselor did not encroach on the client's private space, maintained good eye contact, and asked open-ended questions. The client was somewhat jittery and appeared to have body facial tics. He was appropriately dressed, and his clothes were clean and not disheveled. The counselor ended with a summary of the session and an opportunity for questions to be asked. Application of theory. The biopsychosocial theory is a framework for assessing mental health issues. This is achieved through treatment plans that are holistic, considering biological, physiological, psychological, social aspects, as well as other disciplines. These aspects are considered to provide understanding of mental health and complex behavior disorders. And the next session, then we go to biblical worldview or psychology. To experience a genuine change of heart rather than mere behavior modification, Jesus must be your Savior. Mark 8:36 tells us there is no profit in gaining the world and losing your soul. Nothing outside of Christ remains. Psychology, medicine, therapy, and counseling are beneficial tools as we grow and walk into our God given purpose. We are created in God's image. These are the only character traits that produce actual change and everlasting life. And that concludes my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.